These studies shaped the civilization of Rome, and in many respects the theology and ethics of the Christian churches. They were revived in something more like their original form at the time of the Renaissance. They have transformed the whole of mankind. It would be an exaggeration to say that before the time of Thales of Miletus, men were incapable of rational thought. That would be an exaggeration. But there would be some truth in the statement, since before his time it does not appear that anyone asked those precise questions out of which science and philosophy were to develop. So Thales of Miletus is widely held to be the first philosopher, the father of philosophy in the broadest sense. The questions were, quote, "What is everything made of? How do things come into being, change, and pass away? What permanent substance or substances exist behind appearances?" And these questions, of course, led on to others connected with the existence of the gods, the laws of nature, and the duties or purpose of man on earth. Of course. The originality was both in the asking of the questions themselves and in the assumptions made with regard to how they could be answered. That's important because it was assumed, quote, for the first time in history that the investigator was dealing with a universe that was a cosmos. That is to say, an orderly system governed by laws which could be discovered by logical thought and by observation. Now, Plato later on brings back the idea that the world we're dealing with is a fuzzy thing we can know nothing about, and all we can get is general approximations, and then behind that is the hardcore reality. But Thales of Miletus began the march towards the Golden Age by saying, we can know something about the world. Of course, this assumption that the cosmos was governed by laws, which could be discovered by logical thought and observation, this assumption in a limited way had been made previously. No form of civilization at all would be possible if it didn't generally believe, for example, that spring invariably followed winter. So everybody believes that you can know something about reality. And the civilizations of Mesopotamia and of Egypt, with both of which the Greeks were acquainted, had already made remarkable discoveries on the basis of the observed regular movements in nature. Get this, did you know the Babylonians, pre-Greek, the Greeks inherited stuff from the Babylonians. The Babylonians were gone, though. Quote, the Babylonians were able to predict eclipses, though being ignorant of their true cause, they did not know whether a particular eclipse would in fact be visible from Babylon, from Babylonia. So they knew when eclipses were going to happen, generally, but couldn't tell if they were going to see it or not. Quote, they watched for the eclipses at the right times, and regarded it as a good omen if the eclipse did not appear. There was, as it were, on the one side a certain number of observed recurrent phenomena, and on the other side a great realm of experience, which was regarded as unpredictable and irrational, though in some ways open to influence by means of magic or religious observances. So, there is something out there, some greater reality beyond what the senses can get to, and there is a way to influence it. Magic. Talk to a priest, he'll help you. It was a state of affairs at which the Roman poet Lucretius, a contemporary of Julius Caesar, writing some 500 years after the original revolution of thought, looked back. He wrote, quote, now we're getting from Lucretius, see if you like this guy or not. Lucretius, 500 years after the revolution. This is like us writing about the times of Galileo. There was a time when the life of men was something evidently quite foul. Mankind was groveling on the ground, pressed down beneath the heavy weight of superstitious awe. This superstitious awe, religion, one may call it, he says in parentheses, proudly showed her head in every quarter of the sky, and with an aspect of terror stood over and looked down on mortal man. It was a man from Greece who first dared to raise defiantly his mortal eyes and then to take his stand against her. He could not be suppressed by stories about the gods, or by thunderbolts, or by a sky full of the menace of thunder. On the contrary, these things were an incentive to the cutting genius of his mind. They made him all the more ready to be the first man on the earth to want to break through the bolts fitted across the doors of reality. And so this vital vigor of his spirit won a total victory. He waxes even more about the guy. So now it is the turn of religion to be cast down and trampled underfoot. As for us, the victory has raised us up to the skies. Lucretius, end quote from Lucretius. Lucretius, of course, was writing of Epicurus, and Epicurus was not the first man who dared to raise his eyes. So there was someone before him Lucretius didn't know about. Then, too, Lucretius writes with the rather exaggerated fervor of a convert. It is by no means true that Greek philosophy is necessarily anti-religious. Lucretius loved that aspect of it, for what Lucretius understood to be religion. Greek philosophy was thoroughly anti-religious. For what we understand to be religion, the Muslim faith and the Christian faith were formed inside the realm of Greek thought and culture. Inside the realm of Greek thought and culture. So we can have a different view, but for Lucretius, he was looking at the centuries past, and he said, Greek thought is a fantastic change. Greek philosophy is the down throw of this whore religion. The general picture given by Lucretius is not far from the truth. Something really unique and revolutionary had happened when Thales, for whatever reasons, came to the conclusion that there was a fundamental substance, and that this substance was water. As for superstition, it had certainly not died out at the time of Lucretius, and it has not died out yet. Nevertheless, it is impossible to deny the victory was a real one. Very, very true. But, it's an interesting bit there, Thales came to the conclusion that everything was a single substance, and that substance was water. They said there has to be something in common among everything. Now, this is the method of thought. Humans think this way. Forming a concept is to take three things, take what's in common, and you name that, and that's the concept. Take all these things you see walking around talking, take off the things that don't matter, like their name and the color of their hair, and what you have is the concept of human, you know. And he thought, we've got to be able to put everything in a category. Everything has to have a category. And then whatever exists has to exist inside that category. Interesting that it was the first person to take a conceptual approach to metaphysics. That's basically what it is, taking a conceptual approach to metaphysics. The early thinkers did not call themselves philosophers. It took some time before they became logicians. Now, I've attacked hermeneutics, but I was attacking the modern hermeneuticians, not hermeneutics as such. There's a value to hermeneutics. Here it is. Quote, such notions as substance, matter, mind, element, atom, force, even thing and event were not ready to hand. They were not easily available for a philosopher who was trying to think back in then days. The words for them did not exist. Words had to follow thought. People had to develop this stuff. So that it is impossible that the original thought should have been clearly and neatly expressed. So when we get translations of these philosophers so many years later, you know, how accurate can it be? Next, Thales of Miletus, page 12. Now, Ionia is basically the islands off the southwestern coast of Turkey, of modern Turkey, of Asia Minor. This is the center of all innovation in Greek philosophy in the early days, for sure. Quote, the great innovation began in the Greek city of Miletus at the beginning of the 6th century BC. Miletus was a great seafaring power. Her colonies surrounded the shores of the Black Sea. She founded the first Greek settlements in